right, Shabbat Shalom. How you guys doing? All right, so the Haftarah today, or I guess this week that we're studying is Isaiah 27:6 through 28:13 and Isaiah 29:22 and 23. Kind of my overarching theme in this that I really feel was a big concept that spoke to me, especially correlating to the Torah portion this week that we dealt with, was his remnant returning. You know, the concept of him calling us back and him bringing us back into his covenant that he made with us and that he made with all of Israel, that he wants us to return to and he wants us to come away from the nations from. And so the returning of that remnant and the redemption of that remnant, you know, bringing us out of the sins that we were on and the covering of those sins and knowing that we are redeemed through him. So the portion actually starts in verse 6, but in verses 1 through 5, there was a couple concepts that I really liked and that I just wanted to point out. So verse 1, in that day the Lord will punish Leviathan, the fleeing serpent, with his fierce and great and mighty sword, even Leviathan, the twisted serpent, and he will kill the dragon who lives in the sea. So when it comes to his remnant, we see that Yahweh really is the ultimate overcomer, that he's mightier than the foreign nations around us, he's mightier than the fierce dragon that comes against us, and that regardless of the stumbling block, regardless of where we might be at in our lives, that we feel that we're lost or that we're really brought away, that he is the overcomer and that he really will go to battle for us and be able to defeat whatever enemy that it seems that we're facing that we can't take on ourselves. And then in verse 2 through 4, in that day, a vineyard of wine, sing of it. I, the Lord, am its keeper. I water it every moment, so that no one will damage it. I guard it day and night. I have no wrath. Should someone give me briars and thorns in battle, then I would step on them. I would burn them completely. In these verses, we see the concept is really that he's guarding his remnant, that he's never failing, and that, as I mentioned in the previous, whatever enemy it seems, that we can't walk through by ourselves, or that we can't walk through as humans, that he really is greater than all of that, even if it seems just beyond imagination. And then moving on into the actual portion, starting in verse 6, those who come he causes to take root in Jacob. Israel shall blossom and bud, and they shall fill the face of the world with fruit. So we see that he made covenant with Jacob, that Jacob was called Israel, that he made covenant with his people, and that we see throughout the scripture just the price and the importance that he puts on that covenant, and that when we cry out, he remembers that covenant that he made to us. He's calling us to return, and he's calling us back to the covenant that he made so that we can be blessed and that we can be fruitful in his name, that we see that it's because of him, that it's not because of our own actions, and that regardless of the nations that we feel that we're living in or what's surrounding us, that when he calls us back and we answer that call, that we will be blessed. In verse 7 and 8, has he smitten him as he struck the ones who were striking him? Or as a killer, was he killed as he was killing? In measure, by sending her away, you contend with her. He shall take away his rough wind in the day. He shall take away by his rough wind in the day of the east wind. I just think that's a great picture, that he has not treated us as the other nations. The other nations that came against Israel, he was fully against, and he utterly defeated them, and he was ruthless, and he's never treated us that way as his people. He really has established his mark on us, and that he will never forsake us in those ways, and that he will continually combat us. And so I love the fact that he pointed that out there and really wanted to make sure that we knew that we were a separate people and that we were set apart in his eyes. I also like that he mentions the blowing away in the east wind. I believe it's one of the verses that we read in the blessing on the new moon, that those are expelled, they're blown away like the wind that carries away the chaff. We are not so easily carried away as the chaff of the wheat, that we are really a set apart people that he takes care, and it is not so easy and quick to just destroy. And then moving down in 9 through 13, there's kind of a lot going on in this little section of verses, but the big concept that I'll start with is the price that we must pay for his relationship and his fruit and his blessing and love in our lives is the total removal of the wicked things and the corrupted things that are surrounding us in our hearts and in our lives and in our hearts and all the things that we do and the people that we hang out with and just everything that we're a part of. We can't be 1 foot in and we can't be 1 foot out. There's no half measures there, and I think it really speaks volumes when we can totally remove those stumbling blocks from our lives that cause us to step into sin. There's no time where we can just be partially His. It's either we're full His or that sin is really going to corrupt us. And so I think just the way that He describes it, being able to totally remove it. And in the verse it says, when He makes all the stones of the slaughter place like chalk stones that are beaten to dust, Asherim, which is an idol, and sun pillars rise no more. So He doesn't want any of that lasting there. When He's instructing us to plunder these nations and to remove them, He wants all idols removed. He wants nothing left, and we see that in the cases where there was idols left, that there was also failure, or that there was also just a calling back to those sinful and corrupted things that keep us away from our relationship with Him. And then Yahweh I believe is verse 12. Sorry, I'm just trying to read here, make sure I'm saying the right thing. He describes that He will gather us by the threshing of wheat, as one would thresh wheat. And when you look up the meaning of threshing wheat, it's to separate the edible part of the grain from the straw. And I see that edible part of the grain really being us, or Israel, that it's His people that He's calling back to that covenant of Jacob, and the straw, the part that's being discarded or taken away, is just the corruptible people and the defiled nations that surround us. And so there's a great picture of that separation there, that we are no longer part of the same stock, or that we may have been mixed at one point, but that's being separated and truly just being allowed to be free of those things that are holding us back and escape the slavery that we've been held to. So I love that picture of the threshing. And then towards the end of the little block of verses here, we have, when we hear His great and mighty shofar, it's a call that we all know, or that we all will know. I think it's something that truly speaks to all of our hearts as we've been called to this walk, that we all seem to know the call of His shofar, that when we hear that, it is great and it is mighty and it's majestic, and we all know to answer to it. And so that when we really hear that and it's time to come, which I think it is now, I think He's calling us now, and I think we're returning to that we will worship His name as a set-apart people, that His redemption is truly upon His remnant. And I think that has a lot to do with what I mentioned at the beginning of those three concepts of we're returning and He's really redeeming us as His remnant and us as His people that He's made covenant with. And then moving into chapter 28, verses 5 and 6, as His remnant people, when we walk in His way, and when He blesses us, it's with He blesses and judges us with mercy. It's a concept that we are still set apart, as we saw before, that we're not held to the same standard of the others, that when we are His people and we answer that call and return to Him, He will judge us with mercy, and that He carries us with mercy because He is a merciful God and He really loves us. And so I think just understanding that and not being so caught up in the sin of it, I think a lot of times it's easier for us as humans to really want to focus on the sin and to want to really beat ourselves up over the things that we've done. But I think He knows that we're gonna have those failures sometimes, and that He's gonna cover us through those. And so for us to detract from our relationship with Him and to not progress in that because of those sins, and to hold ourselves back because we're embarrassed or because we feel shame on those things, that we can't let that hold us back any longer, that we really need to focus on the fact that we're covered. Obviously, we don't want to continue to make those mistakes, that we want to learn from them, that we want to grow through that, but I don't think we should ever, fall into the trap of letting that hold us back, and I think it's very easy to do. On those verses, it says, starting at 5, "In that day Yahweh of hosts is a crown of splendor and a headdress of comeliness to the remnant of His people, and a spirit of right ruling to Him who sits in right ruling, and strength to those who turn back the battle at the gate." And so kind of go into the concept of we can't continue to make those mistakes. We do need to be the people sitting in the right ruling. We do need to have the concept of what His Torah is on our heart, and to live in that and to walk in that. because otherwise we can't expect that mercy. We can expect to be judged the same as we judge others. And so just understanding that when we truly in our hearts try to live for him and to give our whole heart, that we will be judged in mercy, that we need to see that his way is how we build our relationship with him. And in verse 8, for all the tables shall be covered with vomit, no place without filth. It's something that really stuck out to me, that the concept of the 1 foot in and the 1 foot out, that any sin within our body, within our soul, within our lives, within our families, anything that we are not correcting will permeate everything else. It will taint our relationship with him if we do not try and remove it. There's a scripture that refers to a dog coming back to its old vomit, that it is much worse for us to return back to sin that we've been instructed to go away from and that we know better than, and then to come back to it, than it is someone who's never been convicted of that. And so I think us really realizing that returning to that old vomit, or not letting the old man die, there is no real place to have a relationship with God or to progress in your relationship with God without being able to get rid of that. There's no place that is affected by sin that is also clean and holy. Every aspect of life in our spirit really is corrupted by that. And so the double-minded nature of us as humans, I think it's easy to fall into a place where we think, oh, that's not that bad, or oh, we can kind of, move on without getting rid of that because it's hard, or we don't want to. And I think that's a big part of realizing what our relationship is with him and what our covenant is with him, that we need to remove it. We need to be able to escape those nations to truly seek his covenant and be blessed and fruitful and move to that next area that he's got for us. And then moving down, verses 9 through 13 in chapter 28, verse 9. Whom would he teach knowledge, and whom would he make to understand the message? Those weaned from the milk, those taken from the breasts. Those weaned from the milk is a stepping away from the learned traditions and values and incorrect normalcies of lukewarm religion and doctrine, and moving back to Yahweh's true covenant and relationship. I think that we see a lot of concepts of this today, and it's very warming to my heart that I tend to see a lot of more of moving away from those normalcies and the things that we've been taught and learned growing up, and that we continue to perpetuate within normal churches, especially with the season that we're in. We see these Christmas services and things like that, and it's not something that we should ever judge or that we should ever be too harsh on people for, but seeing that, to be weaned from the milk, to really come to his knowledge and to eat from him and to not be so led by people anymore is huge in our relationship with him, and really moving into that covenant when he's calling us back. We're being called to be separated from those things. We're no longer meant to compromise and be a part of them, but that we truly need to step into the light that he's called us to and fight against these things and reveal the truth and the doctrine and the lies that we've been taught for so long, and just be able to kind of understand a deeper connection with him that's outside of these realms. And then in verse 9 through 13, the whole chapter 28 really finishes out painting a picture of the error in our flesh and the inability of us to progress or learn without him every step of the way. There are those who leave us, there are those who call us, oh my gosh. There are those of us who have been called and will receive that call and step into the relationship he has prepared for us. There are those of us also who will remain in captivity to the nations that have entered our heart. We see in these verses that he's really, truly calling out his people, and that we have to understand that it's not going to be all easy, and that it's not going to be just love and peace, that there will be times of separation, and that only his true people that really hear his call will be separated from that. There will be those that are stuck in captivity when their hearts are hard, and I think that's his timing, and that we have to understand that that's his timing. But we are called to serve, and we have to be willing to walk out of those nations and to separate ourselves and to realize that we are not under the same captivity as people that surround us or in our families or anything, that when it's their time, if it is their time, that they will be called to that. But it's truly something that we need to focus on ourselves, and for as men, as covering for our families, or just any part that we are responsible for people, that we need to be called out of that and no longer allow ourselves to fall into the grasp of sin and just the confusion, to be able to walk in his path. It is truly the heart of the remnant, and that it goes back to that covenant that he's called us out of those places. Then finishing off the portion, it is chapter 29, verses 22 and 23. Therefore thus said Yahweh, who ransomed Abraham concerning the house of Jacob, Jacob is no longer put to shame, no longer does his face grow pale. For when he sees his children, the work of my hands, in his midst, they shall set apart my name, and set apart the set apart one of Jacob, in the fear of Elohim of Israel. This seems to sum up the overarching theme of this portion. The remnant are returning, and those who surrender to his love shall not be cut off or destroyed or blown away like the chaff, but be multiplied and blessed. We, Jacob, his people, he has made covenant with us. We will see his name in the midst of our lives and know he is with us and rejoice. It is such a strong concept when he says, they will see my work and set apart my name, that there is that majesty that we are revealed. There's confirmation in all of these things, and when we see it, we will set apart his name.